Welcome to the Rich, Young, and Powerful podcast. This is the place where we help average givers become everyday philanthropists. I'm your host, Andrew McNair, a financial commentator, author, nine-figure wealth manager, and philanthropist too. I'm going to show you how to give more, how to find more fulfillment, and help you impact the causes that you care about the most. Because when a giver gives more, they receive and become more. And I'm really excited about bringing on our special guest. Earlier this year, we had Sadie and Christian come on the show. And so I thought we should continue on with the Dynasty. So I want to present to you the authors, the entrepreneurs, stars of the 11th season hit show, Duck Dynasty. Welcome, Willie and Korie Robertson.
Hey there. Thanks for having us.
Hello.
Well, I want to jump right into it. We have so much to talk about. It is so great to have you on. I want to talk about The Blind because me and my wife watched that movie and it was fantastic. I do want to talk about that. But I also want to talk about maybe a story that hasn't been told. Korie, people know you were obviously very pivotal, very important to the growth of Duck Commander, but your family has a lot of business background. The summer camp was also started by them. Can you share about your upbringing and how that prepared you to run the company and help run the company?
Yeah, I was blessed to be born into a very business-minded family. Most importantly, though, they were a family of faith and loved God, and everything they did was for Him and for His glory. But they were also good at business. And my granddad started actually. My dad has written up this for us, for all of our kids, as kind of a legacy, because he started a lot of businesses. He had about 3 that were successful. He had about 18 that failed, and it's such a good lesson to us to say, it's not about all the successes. It's, the failures are what lead you to the things that God has for you sometimes. And so he was a risk taker. He was one that was willing to start things, and if they didn't work, move on to something else. And that played out in his faith too. He started a lot of ministries that are still going on today that my granddad started. My dad passed on. My mom still works at the summer camp that my grandparents begun back in the 1960s, and that is still going today. And so, I was really, really blessed to kind of see that family legacy of faith and entrepreneurship, and just how do those two things kind of meld together?
That's amazing to hear about the tenacity and also just the legacy of faith. And we should never underestimate, raising our kids, and the faith should start not in always a church. It should be, the gospel should be shared within the home, and the prioritization of faith in the home is so important. And that's why, the show title about, stewarding this dynasty is what this show is all about today. So I do want to switch gears and talk about, Willie, for the people that don't know your family's origin story, starting in a bar, I recommend people watch the movie The Blind. But can you share with us a little bit about how your family took a completely different angle by starting in a bar?
Yeah, that was my dad's great idea, was to run lease a bar. He had been fired from his job as a teacher. Feels actually highly educated. He's got a master's degree, and he kind of just wasted everything. He was a star athlete and kind of thrown all that away, quit the football team, got his degree, got fired just from wild living, and then ended up leasing a bar. And so he's pretty much didn't have a lot of upside or things going on in his life. And but it was at that bar that is where he heard the gospel. And so that's where his sister had begged this preacher to go up there and preach to Phil and preach the gospel. And it was very adversarial. Phil was not searching at all. He was not in any way wanting to change the lifestyle he was living. And I think that's why he was at the bar. Phil kind of goes, whatever he's in, he goes all in. And so I think he was into drinking at the time. And so he thought, what a great deal. I can just lease a bar and I can drink all the time and make a little money and be in the environment that I want to be in. And so, and it wasn't until he lost everything that he lost the bar. He was wanted by the police, and he kicked all of us out. And it was in that low spot is where he actually realized that his life needed to change, and it did in a drastic way. And so, and then once leaving there, and then which is kind of where the movie ends, is when he kind of found his way. And then what picked up from there was then him pouring all his passion into business, and all he knew at the time was hunting. He knew he wanted to hunt, so he came up with this idea for a duck call, invented this reed system that hadn't been done before, and just started selling them. He started selling them door to door. Mostly we were commercial fishing. That's how we were paying our bills. So unlike Korie's family, we didn't have a lot of money. We shared the same faith for sure, but and which is what put us together, was actually we ended up at the same church, and so that's how we met one another. But yeah, just started that, and kind of had all these dreams of like, one day we're gonna sell $1 million worth of these duck calls, and none of us we didn't know how that was going to happen, but it wasn't like we disbelieved. We just thought, how is that going to happen? And who would have thought down the road having a giant hit TV show would definitely help you sell $1 million worth of duck calls. So it all
That is
worked
pretty
out.
wild. That is, the Lord works in mysterious ways, as they say. But I think that theme of failures is, for both families, and how the gospel can change those failures into, from a mess to a message. And I think you can see that. I do want to talk about your new book, Gospeller, and also how the gospel message did ultimately change your family's destiny and direction. Can you share with us a little bit more about the new book?
The first chapter, I'll just start there, was so inspired by Phil and Kay's story, which is by the movie, that whole story that we put in a movie form. Because I just started thinking, like, had that not happened, had their life not turned around and had their marriage not stayed together, my life would look completely different than it does now. And when I say it affects every day, it literally affects every day of my life is different. Even talking to you, and the people that are hearing my voice on this show is a direct result of that, because of how we were raised and how life ended up turning out. So, because if the marriage wouldn't have stayed together, I'd have been raised completely different by a different, I guess, my mom, and then a different dad, perhaps stepdad or whatever. But there would have been no Duck Commander, so there would have been no company, which would have meant there's no Duck Dynasty. And so, and you can, as you pull that all the way even to today, just the impact that's been made in business and the kingdom, obviously, of God, and the spiritual impact, the prayer at the end of the show, all the podcasts, the books that have sold millions of copies, Sadie's work and all that she has done. I mean, all of that, I can trace it back. Korie and I get into like 23andMe and tracing your roots, but I can trace the spiritual journey back to that couple in that bar who had no money, no fame, no prospects, no anything. Really, just a long road of trails and tears. But that one couple staying together, keeping those boys together, which I was the youngest at the time, was such an impact. So it really inspired me to go like, wow, not just looking back and being appreciative, which I am, but also looking forward and thinking, what lives could you change just by sharing the gospel with someone, and someone changing their life? It can change who they marry. It can change their marriage itself. It can change their children's lives. It can change so many things, and then it can start impacting other people. Had it only affected our life and kept our family together, it would have been worth it for sure. But man, how would we have known that God had so many more people that was going to be impacted by that, by them staying together directly or indirectly, just from them coming to faith. So that was part of the inspiration. So I started the first chapter. I call it Gospel Genealogy. It's like tracing it back, going, this is where it started, And in fact, his dad's sister, she said, if you convert Phil Robertson, he'll convert 1,000. So how she knew that, I have no idea, because it didn't look like that. Like, he didn't look like the kind of guy who was gonna, be out sharing his faith with anyone. So, but really, that's where it started. But then I have a lot of stories. So I had witnessed Phil. Phil and Kay had always been so hospitable, and he had shared his faith with so many people. There's so many people that had come down to our house. They had sat there in the living room. This is on Saturdays and Friday nights and Thursdays, and just every day of the week almost seemed like someone else was down there. And once he kind of got known for that, people would bring him down. So they'd bring down wayward kids or wayward friends, or married couples would come down who were stressed out and down and out, and they would just sit. And I just watched that my whole life growing up. I just watched them pour into other people and be so unselfish with their lives, with their food, with their house, and as meager as it was. But so I just saw that, and so then I started implementing that as well. Even as a youngster, I would share my faith with people and have Bible studies with people, and so I would, when I'd get turned around, I'd go ask Dad, hey, I got to ask this question. What does this mean? So it created like a thirst for the Word of God to be able to know for myself. And I've always kind of been like, I want to do it myself anyway. I'd rather not just go be dependent on someone else and ask what they think. And so I just kind of wanted to learn that. And so when COVID hit, it, like everybody's life, I mean, mine in particular, because mostly how I was making money at the time was big groups of people gathering together when I would speak or I'd show up to take pictures or do an appearance, and that just stopped. And so I had all this time, and I was like, and so I started actually teaching a class at a local church about how to share your faith, and because it had gotten out. I think Willie's kind of good at that, and so I was doing this, and then I taught with another guy. He said, "What are you up to?" And I told him, and he said, "Wow," he said, "I've never heard it quite like that." He said, "You should put that in a book," and he was in the book business, and I said, "That's a great idea." So I started working on this book, and really started asking people. Like, in fact, at the particular church I was at, there's 2,000 or 3,000 people there, and I said, "Okay, I'm gonna start this ministry." I said, "How many people actually go share their faith?" Like, and I had a notepad and a pen. I was like, I figured there'd be 40 or 50 people who were like known for doing that, and I got one person. I got one name out of a couple thousand, and I thought, well, we can improve on this. And then as I did it more, I realized kind of what holds people back and what people would say, like, as to what held them back. And so most of the time it's like, I just don't know the Bible. I don't know it well enough. I don't know the answers to the question. So I don't get into it with people because I'm not sure what to say, or I'm shy, or it's not my gift. And so I heard a lot of excuses as to why not. And so I kind of started, when I was writing the book, was trying to answer, knock those blocks out of the way, going, okay, we can, can you learn this? Can you do this? And so, and it's chock full of stories that I've had where I've shared with people, and sometimes very simple, sometimes they can get complicated, or most of the time it's not really theological. I mean, those just turn into arguments with people, but people that are actually searching, and so asking questions, having conversations. And so the tagline was, turning darkness into light, one conversation at a time. And Korie actually came up with the name Gospeller. She found that word. It's an old word, really popular probably in the 1700s, 1800s. And it was just someone who was known by sharing their faith, not necessarily.
We need to bring back some of those old words, some of those good words.
Yeah, exactly.
Like that.
And it wasn't like pastoralness. It wasn't like a pastor. I mean, certainly they can be Gospellers, but it was like just common people who were just known for having that night. Kind of like what I mentioned, Phil. Like, once he got known for that, it was like, oh, take him to Phil. He can, because he's got this wealth of life experience where he was like down and out, and now he knows the Bible and he can answer questions. And I think what it does is it shows, number one, that you just care for people. Like,
that's right.
You've got to care enough about people to even ask or even get involved in their story. I think John chapter 4 is a great, like a master class. And this is Jesus talking to a woman at a well. And it was someone he probably shouldn't have been talking to, and his disciples were concerned that he was talking to her. And it all started with the question of, can I get a drink of water? That was the big theological. It was just like, hey, I'm thirsty. Let me get some water. It started there. It got into her story, and then it ended with her whole village and her life being changed by Jesus forever. And so it's that simple, And so I think sometimes it's not as complex as kind of what we make it. And so
but it does start with that interest in that other person. I mean, if you really care about them and you care about their salvation, you should be interested in their life. So many times we go straight to, like, I have to convert this person. I just met them. I need to convert them. And it's like, no, you just need to be interested in them and have gospel conversations, have questions, actually have, Jesus on the front part of your tongue to talk about him and like what he's done in your life, and be interested in people, to listen to him and sympathize with them. And I think that's such a foreign thing these days.
Yeah. As Willie was talking about that and Phil and Kay's story, and thinking about that, thinking about Kay's part of that, whenever Phil kicked Kay out, she came here to West Monroe, Louisiana, And it's because a church took her in. The church gave her a home, gave her and 3 boys, a single mom and 3 boys, an apartment to live in. She got a job. Actually, she came to work at my family's business. My granddad hired her. My dad got to play my granddad in the movie, which was really
wild.
cool. And so, God was weaving our lives together even at that point. But, that part of sharing the gospel, her life was changed because people took her in and took care of her and took care of her family. And she experienced the love of God through people loving her and taking care of her in her lowest point.
Well, Willie, before we leave the book, where can people find the book?
Wherever you buy books, I mean, it's available. It's
It's like Amazon,
Amazon, yeah.
all of them.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Wherever you
Yeah.
buy books.
yeah, you can go.
Yeah.
Yeah, order the book, and it's quick. It's an easy read. I wrote it, so it's pretty easy to read.
Any
educated
practical,
feller.
I don't want to take away from the book, but any practical ways to start some of those gospel conversations?
I think the main thing you've got to just listen. And so the main thing I try to do is listen in a conversation, and that can be, I mean, all these principles apply to everything. So it's like in Korie and I's marriage, I need to listen more than I just talk. And I think that's probably valuable marriage information. But it's the same way when you're talking to someone, you can just listen and you'll hear, oftentimes you'll hear the problems, or you'll hear the anxiety, you'll hear the fears, or what it is that they're scared of, or it could be death, it could be a problem with a child, it could be, there's a lot of things that can say, and I can key off of that and then spin that into getting that message. Again, back to John 4 with that woman at the well. Jesus listened and he mentioned, hey, go get your husband. And so, which created this whole bigger conversation, which is actually, and Jesus knew the story. And oftentimes, and I think about that woman, that town, it was a small town. I'm sure everyone knew, the woman's problems. And so I think sometimes we try to keep them back, but a lot of times people just share them and say, yeah, this is where I'm at. And so we just try to get to that point, is where they are with God. Do they feel, right with God? Do they feel like they're in the right relationship? Because I know this, if you're not confident in your relationship with Jesus, you're probably never going to share that with anyone else, because you're not sure yourself. And so you have to be sure of that, and you have to be confident in that. And so that's kind of where I start. But they can all start in different areas. Someone may come and say, I've got a problem here. I've got, or they could, and there's all sorts of things that may be holding them back. Maybe they're hurt by a church. Maybe they're hurt by a person. Maybe they didn't see, when they think about God as a father, they saw a terrible father. And so, there could be all kinds of things that could open.
But unless you listen, you wouldn't know all that.
Stories.
That's right.
Unless you listen, unless you ask, you would never know. So,
Korie, I want to switch gears and talk about having Sadie and Christian, your son-in-law, on the show. And I really am not trying to flatter you, but you did such a great job parenting. I want to know, and I know a lot of parents want to know, how did you raise your children so intentionally to know Christ?
Well, I think part of it is being intentional about that, is knowing that it is our role as parents to pass on that Psalm 78. Don't neglect telling the stories to your children and your children's children. So I think part of it is that. And I think another part of it, and this is the hard part, is just living it. It's like saying, okay, if I want my kids to be brave, I gotta be brave. If I want my kids to be generous, I have to be generous. If I want them to be kind, I have to be kind. And I can't say one thing and live another. And I think that is the struggle, because when kids see that at home, they're like, oh, mom and dad's going to church and they're saying that this is what's important, but at home they're living like this, something else is important, like work's most important, or material things, or sports, or my grades, that's most important. So I think is really honing down intentionally on what is important, what's important to you, what's important to your family, and how do we actually go about living that. Is the challenge for parents.
It's that authenticity that a lot of people would say about Duck Dynasty. Was like, oh, this is so authentic, you people are real. And so,
and not that we're perfect, not that we're perfect in any way.
Well, that is authentic,
but
right?
Is
I'm not
But you're
perfect, and
authentic,
these
yeah.
are the things I struggle with.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
But you wrote a great book about parenting as well. I would love for you to highlight a little bit about the book that you wrote about intentionality of raising kids.
I wrote a book called Strong and Kind, and it was really that. I was at a Bible study whenever I was a young mom, and I remember someone saying, like, what are the things you want to instill in your kids? And strength and kindness kind of came to mind in that moment, because I had lived enough life to know, like, okay, life's hard. There's going to be some hard things. And so, like, I wanted our kids to have, like, these deep roots. I remember just envisioning, like, okay, I want them to be these trees that are planted with roots that are so deep that whenever, like, the winds come and the storm comes, that they won't break. You know, they might bend, but they will not break. So that strength, and then kindness that's for others. It's like, how do you live on this earth with love and kindness for others? And so those were the two for me. But I talk about in the book a lot, you know, it can be any of them. There's tons of good values and character
Absolutely.
traits or whatever. And I think that we can get so bogged down in those little things of, like, oh, what sports or what school are they at or what's this. And what's really important is just instilling those values in your kids and being intentional about that.
I think that's such a good word. The word of the day is intentionality. I think it's very important, because if you're right, we'll go through the motions of being a parent, and sadly miss out on those guiding virtues and values that our family, we want to share with the world and be salt and light to the world. And that only happens through intentionality, having gospel conversations, and how we raise our kids. I know this is a centerpiece of the show, is the dinner table. And I love that quote from Ronald Reagan that says, you know, all great change begins at the dinner table. And so for many families, you know, money, generosity, tithing, biblical stewardship, those are like topics that some people have ever talked at the dinner table. Like, we're definitely not talking about money at the dinner table. But maybe we've got this wrong. I'd love to hear, and I'm curious, I have no idea how you're going to answer, was giving, tithing ever discussed at the dinner table? How did you have conversations about that, if you did?
I think it's more about just, like, living generously than a specific, like, tithing. Although I think that's important, you know, to give to your church and to give to things, but it's more about just living with a generous spirit. I was also modeled with our family. My dad, I remember one time, we were part of the youth group. The youth group all came to our house, and he gave everyone in the youth group money at Christmas time, and was like, okay, this is for you to give to someone else, and then when you come back next week, I want you to tell us who you gave it to and how that impacted people. So just little things like that we try to do in our family. Let our kids see us giving to someone who asks. Let our kids see us, you know, buying gifts for someone. Let our kids see us. From a young age, when our kids hit double digits, we said they got to go on a mission trip with us, you know. Let our kids see us go and intentionally go and, like, give and of our time and our energy and our money to people who don't have as much as we do. So I don't know as much of a specific conversation as much as
it can.
living it.
Those are the kind of conversations that come up. It's funny you asked that, because right before we started, I was talking to Corey's assistant, and she just did the Dave Ramsey program and got herself out of debt. And
That's awesome.
And we talked about that because he, you know, I guess Dave recommends to give first. And I told her, I said, you just need to give. What I find is when I give, just so many times I just look and go, like, wow, this came about and this came about. And so, and so she was talking about how they implement that, because she didn't grow up. In fact, their first thought was, well, we can't give anything because, you know, we're trying to get out of debt. And so, so that whole principle. And so, yeah, I think those are conversations that certainly will come up, you know, at our dinner table for sure. And we would want to talk about that and show that. And Corey's dad's always been good with that. I remember Corey's dad going from, like, and which was probably at a dinner table, and he was like, all right, I'm going from 10% to 20%. And I remember when he was, like, going from 20% to 30%, you know. It was like a goal he had, is like, I'm going to give
Each
this
year,
away.
give more.
Right, to give
Yeah.
more.
Yeah. Back to that intentionality of being goal-oriented is like, hey, I want my goal to be how generous I'm being. Not, you know, a lot of people's goals are, well, if I make more money, that'd be a great goal. If I increase my net worth, that'd be a great goal. But the intentionality of being generous, I mean, that's a good, worthy goal of setting.
Yeah. I think for us, it's like those daily conversations, and those are the things that we do and talk about with our kids a lot, you know, just on a daily basis, just in the car or wherever. But then also we started kind of implementing some, like, once a year, where we all sit down as a family and say, like, what are the things that are important to us? Like, what are our goals? Like, what are the things that we want to be known for as a family? And I think that's an important thing for families to do, is to to set those intentions and just plan those. You could do it like on your family vacation, or it can be like you can pick a time in the year that you're going to sit down and do that, but just intentionally sitting around the table and having those conversations about what you want your family to be about and what you want your family to be known for.
Well, and I think actually in the super practical level is seeing where the money is. And so I think our kids have witnessed that. Like they've been a part of either a trip overseas where they actually see this is money that's been given, that's for other people, not just for ourselves or not just for our own vacation so we can all have fun and enjoy it ourselves, but they actually can see that and they can hear these stories about, oh, this is what we gave here and this is what's happening. And so not just we gave a check somewhere to something, but it's actually seeing and living. And I think that's what we like about that too, is actually seeing where it's at, seeing the movement of certain things that we give to is actually seeing it affect people's lives.
Yeah. I think that's so important. You compare that. I mean, I give advice to retirees every day, and I've heard many of them said, I had no clue that my parents were as well off as they were. And they left me this big inheritance. They lived, very frugal. We never talked about money. And then the opposite, I did not know my parents had nothing and I had to go take care of them and pay for all of their care. And it's because I don't think it's talked about at the dinner table. And for sad reasons, we just leave it open to interpretation. And I think it should be talked about, like, here's what our giving goals are. Here's where our savings goals are. Here's how our spending goals are. And I think if we were more intentional with our children, with our grandchildren, they would be modeled that, and it's open conversations and dialogue for them to learn versus them having to learn from society. I mean, society already has a plan for your money. I mean, that's what ads exist for, is to tell you where to spend your money. But we need children to be told by their grandparents and parents who know better. I do want to ask you, because back to I can't give anything I can't give first. Did any stewardship perspectives or habits change before Duck Dynasty, before having success with the company and the show? Because a lot of people will say, I can't be a giver. I can't be a philanthropist. I cannot do that because but what if I ever hit it big? If I ever get famous? If I ever do this, then I'll give. Do you see any perspectives that changed over time or habits that changed before and after, or was it the same?
I feel like it was the same. I mean, we gave, from what we had. I mean, out of generosity, obviously it changed. It was bigger, and so there was bigger things you could do. And one of the things I've always said is, I enjoy making money, but love giving it away. It's fun. That's the fun part, is actually being able to put it into things that you like. And so there's a truer joy, I think, from there than just from making it. That's for me. But yeah, I think the principles were the same, and I think there were certain things that I remember when I was as a youngster. I was like in seminary, and so there was like this local support at a local church that would help, and like from individuals. And so they were like, you can ask people, and they can. And Corey's parents are actually, they were on my list, so they actually supported me before we were even dating. They gave me like $50 a month or something, which was awesome. And a couple of other couples, but I remember this one little lady. She was this tiny little person who cleaned the church building, and she gave me $10 a month, and I just never forgot that. This lady is cleaning the church building. She was like a widow, I believe. What's sad is I actually took the $10 a month at 18 years old, which I questioned what I was doing. I guess
you wanted to get. You, just like Jesus didn't run back to the widow and say, "Here's your money back. We don't need your. We don't need the. No, I mean, he tells the story, and that's where he leaves it. It's not that he ran after and gave it to her.
Yeah.
And so, even in life, as it turned out, and this is honestly even before Duck Dynasty, I just loved going up to this lady because she was so frail at the time. She was older, and I would just go up and just slip her a $100 bill or $500, which I knew was just huge for where she was in life. And because I'd never forgotten that $10 a month she'd given me, years before. And so things like that just impacted me, but then also trying to implement that with other people as well, is giving them something and then challenging them to go give, and say, now you give, even when I saw selfishness, in other people, I was thinking about a particular guy, and I thought this kid's so selfish, and so, but I came up and I gave him a gift one time. I said, here's something for you, and I knew he would need it at the time, and I said, I want this to burn in you that, now you need to be that person who gives to someone just like you're receiving this gift. So yeah, just trying to teach those principles to others as well, and that can be in different ways, and so
right.
It's a fun lesson to teach people in that.
Yeah, it's amazing the ripple effect of generosity. I think it is very contagious. I do want to talk about being from a small town. I consider myself being from a small town, but now everyone's found my town here on the Gulf Coast. It's not as like a hidden gem as it once was. But how do you steward, and how do you steward when you had, being from a small town, then becoming very popular, successful? How do you wear the weight of that fame and success?
I think it can be a little bit of like, it can feel overwhelming because you have this generous spirit and you want to be generous, and that's how, you've lived your life. Like we got married at 18 and 19, and we, were tithing and wanted to be generous. And when somebody asked for something, we wanted to be the ones that we could give it to them. And then all of a sudden you're kind of asked by everyone, there's like so much need, you realize like, oh, wow, you're getting emails from people whose houses burned down and who's this and that. Wow. And there's just and there's all this need that feels really overwhelming.
Need
and it is
fatigue.
Hard to know how to discern it and I think that's where, for us, it's just kind of going to God and leaning on the Spirit to lead us to where He is calling us and where He's asking us. There's different, there's different times where I was on a board of a nonprofit for a long time, kind of help one now that did work in different countries, and I felt like, okay, my calling feels a little bit more towards these people in other countries, and Willie felt more called to people like right here, and I was like, oh, that's where God kind of is leading us differently. And then there's times when He's led us together where it's like, oh, I think we should do this. And we're both like, yes, this is it. This is where we're going to put our money to or our gift to. So I think in that it's really just kind of leaning on the Spirit, asking God for wisdom and how to discern that and where He's using you. And you can't do everything, but the places that you can have an impact, the impact can be really powerful and incredible to see. And it gets to be a
I think
part
that's
of.
great. Sometimes in marriage it's both, and then it's him, then it's her. I think that's the beauty of marriage is following each other's discernment.
Yeah, I got an email one time, and a lady said, which as you can imagine, when Duck Dynasty came out, we were getting thousands of emails from everybody that had a problem in the world, and she said, God told me that you were going to give me $34,000 to pay my house off. And I didn't email her back to tell her, but I thought, well, maybe God told the wrong person. Maybe if he'd have told me that, it would have been a lot different than he told you.
I wish he would have started with me when he told you that.
If I'd have said, oh, you're the one, God told me this was going to happen. And so, there were times that some of them were just, we would just kind of smile and have to laugh sometimes. It's like, I've never heard so many things that was, everything imaginable. And some were sad and some were not even sad. Some were just like, hey, I think you got more than I got, so why don't you kick some our way? And I think in our community, it was tough. It was tough in our community. These are people we grew up with, and and it was weird. It was like some people were like super proud and thought it was awesome, and some people were just sort of like, I don't know if it was jealousy or then they just didn't like you. It was like, I don't even like them, and I was like, well, we haven't even done anything, we haven't said anything. So that can be tough in a small town, as or they think, oh, now you think you're better than everyone else. And I think anytime you do something outside of average, I guess, it for some people it flares them up to be like, oh, who do you think you are now? And I'm like, no one. I didn't say I was, I think
I
I'm
didn't
the
change.
same guy. I just happen to be on television, that's the only big difference. So, but there were some, it is tough, I think, trying to manage that inside your own little town.
Absolutely, I can imagine. As the CEO of a successful business, how did you go about raising your children? It's one thing to deal with the general public, but raising your children not to feel like they were raised on third base and born on third base. How did you go about making sure that that wasn't going to be the case?
I don't even know if we were even successful in that. It's just, I think it's,
Still figuring that out?
I'm being completely honest. Like, it was completely not the way I grew up, and so I don't know how you try to manufacture how I grew up. There was a certain hunger and a certain, like, just, it's a mentality, and it's not one of just wanting to stay where you're at, but it was like, man, you've been to one place and now it's nice to be in another. And so the timing of our kids as far as the success, because we had the kids at the same, it wasn't like we were successful younger than we had kids, and so they
Right.
grew, and it was like bang, we went from, and not that we weren't, Korie and I weren't as poor as what I was when I grew up, but certainly different. And then so that's tough. It's tough not to be able to say, well, now you can have a car, and so for me, that was like, there was no you can have a car moment. It was like, you can go get one if you can figure out how to get one. And so
That's right.
so
you
yeah,
got that public bus right there.
yeah, it was just, so I don't know that we, did all the things, where it's like my kids were like, taught the lesson. We just tried to teach the lessons we taught, that we knew were true.
Yeah.
But it was, it was definitely, we definitely knew that we had more than others, and
Yeah.
less than some, but it was, those are hard things to do, is to actually implement that in your kids and try to, like I said, help create that, that desire and that gusto to go,
Well, I thank you for
improve on
being
that.
authentic, because a lot of people, they say, I just want my kids to have a better life than me. And I hear that so many times. I want my grandkids to have a better life than me. And I'm like, you have to be very careful with what you're saying, because if you do that, you take away the gravity, and that gravity is what keeps their bones from shriveling and dissolving. And so sometimes hard times, creates really strong people. And so if you want to take all of you make it super easy and, oil it up for them in life, it's not going to go well for them. Korie, would you add anything to what
Yeah,
Willie was saying?
I was thinking that I think one thing that we really tried to instill in our kids and that I see in them, and I'm so thankful for, is gratefulness. Just really instill in them to be grateful for what you have. And we always talk about, because at the end of Duck Dynasty, we all sat around the dinner table and we thank God for what's before us. And, we did that when it was, if it's frog legs on the table or whether it's filet mignon at the table, it's like that gratefulness for what God has given us and what he has for us. And it's not about the material things, or it's not about whatever. And so I think that's a part of it. And I also think you should build those things in your kids that make them be resilient. Let them fail. Let them go try things, let them travel and see the world and experience that, like, it's not all whatever's happening in your little bubble, and so I think those are things you have to be more intentional about in putting into your children whenever they do grow up in a place that there's a lot of success. And honestly, even in our country, there's a lot of people hurting. There's financial trouble and everything. But when you go to some of these other countries that you see that don't have the safety nets that we have, you realize, like, oh, like, I can't even complain about anything because of how blessed we are and how just good we have it, honestly, compared to what a lot of the world is living with and
Certainly.
is living through right now. So I think part of it is being intentional about letting your kids see that, so that they can kind of understand gratefulness and understand generosity and why generosity really matters.
I was confused by you saying filet mignon and frog legs. Were you saying filet mignon was better?
Well,
Were
arguably
using the
that
frog
could be
legs
better.
as the lower end? Because in my
Chicken?
I would rather have frog legs any day than filet mignons. I just didn't understand.
Well,
That's my favorite delicacy of food is frog legs.
Well,
So,
filet mignon's a little bit more expensive.
well,
So
it's according to
just
what
saying.
frog legs are harder to get. I can tell you that for
true.
sure.
That's true. The market of frog legs is probably limited. That's great. I think it shouldn't be lost on anyone listening is prayer. I think Thanksgiving and gratefulness for daily bread is so important to incorporate in your family prayers to remind them, like, I didn't earn this. I didn't earn the house that's over our head, and being grateful for what the Lord's provided. And no matter how big how tall the ceilings are, it's just being grateful and thankful. So I think that's a good practice, and y'all did that very well on the show and personally, so that's great. I do want to talk about, because I've had the Green family on with Hobby Lobby, so only sharing what you feel comfortable, of course. Can you talk about your approach to legacy planning and preparing the next generation with these businesses that you've created, and how do you prepare that for them?
Well, again, I don't know. I mean, we're in the process of. The reason I don't speak of my kids as much because they're still. It's not like how they turned out. It's like they're still turning out. So it's like
they're works in progress, like we all are.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think for us to say my kids in their 20s. When I was in my 20s, I didn't even work for Duck Commander. I had a completely different job. I never even dreamed I'd be in the family business, and so that didn't happen until I was about 30. And so I think we're cautious about trying to lay too many things out because we don't want to be trapped into what we said. It's like, well, that's what we thought was going to happen because we can. I think Korie and I both just we like change, and we like, hey, if you want to turn around and do this or do that, we never try to push our kids into any part of anything as far as business or. My dad never did that with us, and we never said, hey, you're the one who's going to run this business. And so we're trying to figure out where they end up. And, I think the principles of, when you take care of a little, you'll get more, responsibility. And so I don't necessarily think it's, that may go outside, especially what someone may call fairness, especially I think if you're not good with stuff, you may think it's not fair. You're like, oh, this is fair to be this. But I'm like, no, if you're not skilled at a certain thing, I'm not going to put you in charge of that,
I think it's very biblical. I mean, if you look at the
Yeah.
story of the talents, I think the most provocative part of the parable is when Jesus says, and he took from the one that had the limited, the smallest amount of talents and gave to the one that had the most. Like that's an upside down kingdom right there that we're used to. But it's important to, make sure that you don't put all that weight onto your kids. If you have a business or if you are successful, to say, you're going to do it just like me, or you live up to that standard of what I've done, because there's so many higher achievers that may listen to this show, and you don't want to put your kids into that unbearable and again impossible way to live up to your expectations. If anything, you should probably encourage them to not work in the family business, go work in someone else's business, and then maybe come back.
Oh, 100%. And we've actually discussed that with each other, like saying this may be a good time for them to work for somebody else because they're not going to get, they're going to be looked at differently. And yeah, I think in America, I think we would probably just reject the whole parable of the talents anyway and say they should have all gotten 3 apiece anyway because that was the fair way, and so we don't even like the idea of some of that. And I definitely think there was a principle there. And so with our kids, it's the same way, and I think, even if you go the parable son, who was wanting what he wanted to get, and the dad said, okay, here you go, and then it was squandered and lost, and we know how the story turns out, but it's not that, sometimes we don't always. I'd say it like this: I'm glad I didn't get everything that I asked for when I was, probably in my 20s, from anyone, because whatever I was thinking, it certainly could have went the wrong way or been wasted for sure, or not put in the right place. And so And so we're able to walk with them in life. And fortunately, our kids, most of them are right here that live with us. A lot of them now work for the business, which was not the case even a year or two ago. That wasn't the case. And so we've seen them gravitate towards, kind of like I did, where I gravitated back towards this family business. And so, and then we can teach more lessons. We can also watch how they work and what they're skilled at and what they're not. Some are good with money, some are not. It's not, I'm the CEO of our family business. I'm the third son. I'm not the oldest for at all, and but I kind of had that knack for that. And then I think the proof's in the evidence of what you do. And so when you are successful, and you can obviously lay it out for anyone to say, here's where we started. Here's kind of like the talents, right? It's like,
that's right.
We started here, now we're here. This has been the growth, and and I won't take all the credit at all for it. It was a group situation, but there are leaders, and there are people who lead and can that have vision, that can make decisions, and they're just better. Like my brother Jace didn't really want that responsibility. He wanted to build up calls and not have as much pressure, and that's fine. That's not that's not a negative. I think
right.
Sometimes we're like, well, that's a negative because you should want to be in charge. It's like, no, that's not for everyone to do that. And
it's back to listening and watching. I mean, and that's what good parents should do, is they should listen and watch and probably let them talk less and direct, and just like, hey, I see them doing really better with the numbers versus one's more in the practical of the building. And this is for both of you. I know your passion is in evangelism. Can you speak to the business owner on how they can use their business maybe as a platform to share the gospel?
Oh.
I was just going to say, I think that, our show, Dynasty, whenever we actually started that show, we started on a small channel called the Outdoor Channel, and it was really a marketing tool to sell our duck calls. We were like, oh, reality TV is a great commercial for your company. And then whenever we got asked to do it kind of on a mainstream network, whenever a production company came to us and said, hey, we think you have what it takes to go to like a big network, that was when we realized, like, oh, okay, like God is going to use this for something for him. And so we really prayed, like, God, use this for your glory. And when we started the show on A&E, people would ask us, like, oh, are you going to like talk about your faith? Are you going to, and we just said, they can't get around it, because that is who we are. It is like, our faith affects how we are as employers, how we are as husband and wife, how we treat our kids, how we treat our parents, how we treat our siblings. And so our faith is who we are in everything that we do. And so you're not going to get around that, because it infiltrates everything. So I think when you do that in your business, when you allow your faith, it's not like, it doesn't have to be you're preaching every time. It doesn't have to be you're having Bible studies every day at your workplace. It just has to be how you live your life. Your faith informs everything about how you live your life, and that will preach the message of the gospel through your work. And God used, this show about a family in Louisiana that makes duck calls to impact people in
It's an amazing
ways
story.
that we could have never imagined.
Yeah,
Well, as we wrap up, if you can share again some upcoming things that you'll have that you want to share, and where can people find the blind movie as well? I want to definitely highlight that, because it was an amazing thing that y'all did putting that on, as well as the Gospeller book. If you'll share that one more time before we close.
Yeah, The Blind is on, right now it's on Great American Pure Flix, and you can watch it there. I think you can also find it on Amazon and some of the other places, but it's there for when you're a member of that. You get to watch that for free right now. And the Gospeller, you want to tell about the Gospeller?
I think it's everywhere.
I think it's everywhere, yeah.
I think it's, I'm not the big online guy, but I think wherever you find a book, you can just, buy it there. And, and hopefully, like I said, hopefully it sparks something to where it's like, I can use this, and I can use this at my work. And just to touch back on that, like, you don't have to be weird, like my dad was like, we need to preach more on our show. And I said, Dad, this is not the, when I go through the drive-thru, I don't necessarily need the guy trying to preach me a sermon as I'm getting the taco. I think Chick-fil-A does a great job just by their workers and how they say, my pleasure, and they're kind and nice. And so you can see the aspects of faith without having to get,
I think it's service, being
2x4,
interested, and then having those gospel conversations. And you can't just start with the gospel conversation.
Yeah, they can come know more, and if I'm talking to somebody personally, I'm trying to get to that's where I want to get with them. But I think we can show that in our businesses for sure, but be bold as well.
That's right.
I don't think we should just take that out. I think that's a lie of the world to say, well, these two things do not mix. And that was told to my father, saying, you cannot mix this with business. It doesn't work like that. And we found that every time we infuse our faith even more, business always gets better. So
I love it. Well, thank y'all so much for coming on the show. It's been a real privilege to hear about your parenting, to hear about Gospeller. So thank you so much for coming on the show.
Awesome.
Thanks for having
Great talking
us.
to you.
Well, thank you again, Korie and Willie, for coming on the show. I've really enjoyed talking about intentionality and stewarding this dynasty that you've done so well. That's all we have for this episode of the Rich, Young, and Powerful podcast. One thing that would really help us both and other new potential listeners is for you to rate our show on iTunes and Spotify, and also share it with anyone you know that would really enjoy this, who's a parent, who's trying to parent out there in this very troubled world. It is difficult to be a parent out there, so this will be encouragement for them. So please share. Also, check out the richyoungandpowerful.com website to check out our book and our blog. You don't want to miss any of those items that we have. Also, check out The Everyday Philanthropist. We have a YouTube channel that answers questions on philanthropy, giving, and tithing, and so you can get the answers to your questions. But until next time, remember that when a giver gives more, they receive and become more. See you next time.